MX Linux. What can I say about this distribution that hasn't already been said by others or myself? It's a great distro. A lot of people seem to love it. And in my previous review of MX Linux 18, I came away very impressed. And when MX Linux 19 was released just recently, I was very eager to give that a shot. And here it is. It's installed right now on my System 76 Lemur, the same laptop that I use for probably most of my reviews nowadays. And we can see the default desktop right here. And it's installed and ready to go, and we're going to check it out in this video. So how does MX Linux 19 stack up to version 18, the previous release? Well, that's what I'm going to explore in this review. If the quality is the same, what are my opinions of this new version? Is the magic happening yet again in 19 just like it did in 18? Is it as good? Well, let's go ahead and dive right in, and I will give you my review of MX Linux 19. Now, this is actually already installed, like I mentioned. This is not running in live mode. This is installed on the actual hardware. I have a video already on my channel that shows you the installation process. So if you're curious what that looks like, go ahead and check out that video. Now, I will mention real quick that the installation routine this time around is pretty much the same as it was before. It's every bit as good as it was in MX Linux 18. We get all the options that we would expect. It's very easy for newcomers because you could simply select the defaults as you go through the various screens, and you get some advanced options as well if you want to do custom partitioning or even have some extra space unpartitioned while you install it, which is a pretty awesome option to have because, you know, that gives you some flexibility that you generally don't see in Linux distributions today. So whether you are a beginner or an advanced user, I find that the installer for this distro is a good fit for pretty much everyone. And while it may not be the fastest installer that we have today, it does actually install the distribution fairly quickly. I don't have an accurate benchmark, but I think it's reasonable to say that you can get this installed in less than 10 minutes and probably faster depending on your hardware, and you'll get this installed. But you know what, even though some installers are actually faster than that, I think 10 minutes is very reasonable. Now, in terms of the installation, there is one glaring downside here. Actually, not about the installation, but the ability to upgrade, or in this case, the inability to upgrade from a previous version. So if you're running MX Linux 18 currently, congratulations, you have to do a clean install, which I think that this is a pretty significant downside because, I mean, let's face it, any other Debian-based distribution, they have no problem setting it up to be upgradable from, you know, the current release to the next release. Debian, which this is based on, goes through considerable effort to make sure that everything is easily upgradable from one major version to the next. And I personally feel like that's a great downside here. I just don't see any logical reason for there not to be an upgrade path from MX Linux 18 to 19. So if you are currently running MX Linux 18, that might be a pretty big inconvenience for you, unfortunately. Now, that's not to say that that's the end of the world, because you can simply back up your package lists in your files. And if you have your home directory in a different partition, of course, you could do a clean install without too much inconvenience. But it just seems strange to me that a distribution with all these extra features that's otherwise awesome wasn't able to set up an upgrade path from the previous version to the new version, when literally pretty much every distribution does give you that option. And upgrade woes aside, what you are left with when you do get this installed, though, is awesome, because this distribution, so far from my test, continues to be awesome. And it's got a lot to live up to. It's got quite a reputation. A lot of people are just really bragging about this one. And you know what? They have met that. It actually is a great distribution, even still in 19. So it's still impressive, and I'm going to show you all the ways in which it impressed me. So at first glance, it can seem like a very straightforward XFCE desktop, but there's a lot of depth here, a lot of customization beyond what most XFCE based desktops provide you. And you can see that right from the welcome screen, which you see right here, that appears right when you log in for the first time. Now we get some obvious stuff here, like a link to the forums and videos and whatnot, but we get more than that as well. Like, for example, we have a selection here that shows that it has something to do with codecs. So if I click on that, and then I type in my root password that I set up during installation, what this basically allows you to do straight away is to go ahead and set up the installation of codecs that may be required to play any proprietary media formats that you may have in your home directory. So I'll click OK, and there it goes. Those are installing. So right away, this is beneficial to me because especially when I'm creating YouTube content, sometimes I run into distributions that can't play the video file that I encode before I upload it, so I can't preview it. Then I gotta find some kind of codec to make that work. But right here, straight away, we get an option to go ahead and get that installed. Now, not everybody needs codecs because, let's face it, most of the time we're watching videos and listening to music via online services. But if you're like me and you still have these files, then they make it easy to get the required software installed. And here we are. We have successfully installed those codecs, so I'll just go ahead and click OK, and we're back at this screen. I'm going to show you some more customization here. So we have tweak, and this shows that it is specific to the panel, for example. So if I click on that, and right away, look what it did. Before you even get to a point where you are going to customize your panel, it just came up with a message and basically said, hey, by the way, we backed up your current config. And I can't tell you how much of my time has been spent when it comes to supporting end users when the root cause was they accidentally deleted a panel or they did something, very silly. This gives me, an administrator, an opportunity to easily restore their settings if they did something silly and deleted something that they shouldn't have. Or if I am experimenting myself and I make some kind of mistake, or I just want to go back to the way things were, then MX Linux basically makes it a point to go ahead and back that configuration up for you before it even presents you with a screen to start making changes. In here, it shows that it backed it up in the .restore folder. So if I open up the file manager, I could do Control H to view hidden files. We can see the .restore folder is right here. It's a hidden file because it begins with a period. And we could just go ahead and go through this directory here, and it's basically going to show the files that are in the backup. Basically, it took a copy of the XFCE4 and the panel directories and configuration files that pertain to that right here that would normally be in the .config folder, and it made a copy of those, so should we need to restore that, we can easily do so. So if I click OK, we get a utility called MX Tweak. And we have the panel on the left side here by default. And I like that a lot. We have a lot more real estate left and right nowadays than we do up and down. So, it kind of makes sense to me to put the panel, vertically on the left or the right side because it's going to waste as few resources as possible that way. I just kind of feel like you lose more real estate if you have the panel horizontal. I'm not sure if that's why they made that decision, but that's why I actually prefer this method. And if I was going to have a panel at all, let's face it, normally I just, go without that, then I would probably want it to be vertical on the left or right side. But let's be honest, that's not for everyone. So if you prefer that to be on the bottom, which is more traditional, that's pretty easy to do. So we could just check this box right here, display panel horizontally, and then we can apply that. And then it's going to put it down here at the bottom. And if we prefer that to be at the top, we could do that as well. We can definitely customize that, and then we can set it back to the default by just checking this box to display it vertically. And similarly, we can also put it on the right or the left, so we get full control as far as where this panel is on the screen. Now, if we make a mistake, so say for example, I'm just going to go ahead and display it horizontally again, and I'll put it at the top. We can actually restore the default panel, just basically start over, start from fresh. Let's just get that back the way it was when we first installed it. I'll check this box right here, and I'll apply that. we now have it on the left-hand side. It basically restored the default panel layout, so that gives you an easy way to get back to that should you need to do so. Now, some of the changes here are just plain smart. Now, there's simple things like when you put in a Wi-Fi password in live mode when you go to install this, it'll carry that over into the final install, so you don't have to add your password again. Now, MX Linux is not the first distro to do this. Quite a few do, but some don't. They went ahead and made sure that that does work. But another thing that they did was they gave you the ability to make the changes that you have made in live mode actually apply to the final installed version. So you can actually configure your environment in live mode and then have that copied over to the installed version, which is just plain brilliant. And again, I can go on, but you get the idea. They definitely do configuration right, and they give you probably more control here over your distribution than most distros give you nowadays. We'll get back to the video in just a moment, but I wanted to take a minute to mention my sponsor and cloud infrastructure provider, Linode. Linode provides virtual servers that make it easy and affordable to host your own app, site, or project in the cloud. Whether you're a Linux power user or just a beginner, you can use Linode. You can start from scratch and fully customize your server for any application, or use Linode's one-click apps to deploy game servers, WordPress sites, personal VPNs, and much more. You can even upload and run your own image. Linode comes with amazing 100% human, 24/7 customer support by phone or support ticket, along with hundreds of docs and guides to help you get started. Sign up to get $20 free on your new Linode account with the code LEARNLINUX19 or by signing up with the link in the description. I really appreciate Linode's sponsorship of my channel. They're awesome. Definitely check them out. Now, let's get back to the video. Something else that's also pretty cool is we have a tools menu right here. And that brings up MX Tools, which is basically like a control panel that gives you options for all kinds of different things. We have a live USB maker built right here. And that's pretty cool because normally I just use Etcher for this kind of thing, but I don't even need to download Etcher because we have a live USB maker right here installed by default, which is pretty cool. We have a boot repair option. We have user manager right here, which allows us to add users to our system from one easy to use menu. And this is the MX user manager, which is actually pretty cool because you get your standard stuff like, set your username, the user's passwords. There's options that you can configure here. So if you want to modify a user account, like if I want to modify my own, I can set myself to automatically log in, for example. Now if I go to copy/sync right here, it's going to open a file browser window. This allows you to copy user configurations to another folder. Essentially, you basically choose a user right here. So kind of think like that browser window should have appeared later. Not sure why. But anyway, you choose a user to copy from. You can copy the entire home directory. For example, you could just get just the Mozilla Firefox settings if that's all you want, the shared folder, documents folder, and it goes ahead and gives you a progress bar. For copy to, that's where you click browse and you choose the target directory, which is pretty cool. You can add a new group right here, so I'll just do test. You can hit apply, and it went ahead and created that group for me. System group was added, okay, so I added a new group called test. And then to make your user a member of that group, you can simply select your user. If I scroll over here, we have the test group that I just created. Now again, there's all kinds of things that you can do here, but I'll leave it up to you to experiment with this and see what kinds of options you can find. Back at MX Tools, we have other things that we can do. So if you are running on a gaming PC, we have the NVIDIA driver installer shown right here, which gives you a direct link to go ahead and get that installed. This system does not have an NVIDIA card, so I won't be able to show you that, unfortunately. We have a cleanup utility, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And we can actually free space. So we have the user we want to repair, and we can go ahead and clear thumbnails, delete the apt cache, old log files, you get the idea. And you know, these guys are really clever because right here, they have a link to run the disk usage analyzer, which is really useful if you want to find out what in particular in your system is using the most disk space. So if I click on that, we get an application called Baobab, if I'm pronouncing that right. Let's see, I'll just go ahead and show you. Right there it is. But I like to call this the disk usage analyzer. I think that's a lot easier to say. But anyway, what it allows you to do is scan a particular folder for seeing what space is being used. Now, obviously, I'm not using anything because this is just a test machine, but when it comes to user support, it seems like a great deal of my time is being spent trying to figure out what is being used, like what types of files or what particular folder is using up the most space on the hard drive. And right here we have a utility linked right off of the cleanup tool that will give you that answer. Now that's what I mean by clever. It just kind of seems like these guys have thought of everything. So I'll just go ahead and click on this just to show you what it looks like. And it's going to scan basically all the subdirectories. I just chose the root file system. And you get this information graph. So the bigger the chunk, the bigger the size. So we see that the live directory is 2.5 gigabytes. And we see that user is 4.7 and so on, which isn't really all that useful because, you know, this is just the operating system. And you get a list of folders here and so on. So I showed you the root file system, but of special importance is home directories because let's face it, that's usually where most of the storage is actually used. We only get an option for root's home directory right here. I don't see an option for mine, but if I go ahead and click up here, scan folder, I can click on other locations, computer, home, my user folder right here, open that up. Now clearly I don't have very much used up right here, but if I was to make myself at home on this distro, you would probably see a bunch of MP3s, video files, especially video files. These YouTube files that I record, they actually could be very large. That's probably what you would see being used up here, but this gives you an idea. If you are curious about what in particular is using the most space, well, here is how you find out. Now, this tool, the Disk Usage Analyzer, is not specific to MX Linux. You can install this in pretty much any Linux distro, but the fact is they installed it by default, which is great. Some distributions actually install things by default, nothing fancy there, but they went ahead and integrated a button to get to this right from their own custom-built cleanup tool that they provide as part of MX Tools, which is an example of the fact that the developers of this distro just go the extra mile, which is probably one of the reasons why it's so popular. Now, we are built on Debian 10 specifically, so that's basically the main highlight of this release is that they are moving everything over to the new Debian base, which is great because Debian 10/Buster is a pretty cool distribution, and it is a good base to base off of. So being built on Debian was a pretty good decision. I mean, let's face it, Debian Stable is a great distro, although when I reviewed it, you know, as much as I like it, I found that it's stable to a fault, which means I just don't agree with the fact that we have to have very old package versions in order to have a stable distribution. I mean, let's face it, Ubuntu has more bleeding edge packages that are more current, not too current, but they're able to still provide a stable working environment for your workstation or servers. So I do feel that Debian, unfortunately, is very far behind. And as a result of that, usually requires the end user to jump through more hoops in order to get their environment up and running. That being said, I feel like MX Linux, again, gets rid of a lot of the rough edges because they take care of a lot of that work for you. So if somebody wanted to know, like, okay, what's the best version of Debian or spin of Debian to get into to experience Debian, I would probably steer them towards MX Linux if they are talking about setting it up on a laptop or desktop. And during my time with MX Linux, I haven't noticed anything here that crashed or presented any kind of problem for me whatsoever. It's been a very stable experience. And who could ask for more than that? As far as the look and feel goes, I already mentioned the panel here on the left-hand side, which in my opinion, I think that's actually a decent place to put it because I feel like it gives you the most screen real estate, because having it here across the bottom, I just feel like that wastes more space. As far as the theme is concerned, I think that the theme here is definitely a great selection. I get the feeling that this is a mix of several different themes, which was the case in the past. I'll go ahead and see if I'm right in a moment. But you know, it does look decent. It's definitely not the best theme I've seen in a distribution, but you know what? It actually looks great. And let's face it, as great as the XFCE desktop is, its default look and feel isn't all that great. So they went ahead and went the extra mile to make sure that the interface for the end user actually does look modern and professional, which I feel like they did succeed in. In regards to the actual theme itself, I'm going to go ahead and open up settings. Then appearance. We are using the Graybird MX theme for the buttons. For the icon theme, Papyrus is the icon theme that we are using for that. And then back to all settings, if I go to Window Manager, the Window Manager theme is Arc Dark. So while the theme is pretty good, I think that the MX Linux team should probably at some point, you know, get their own theme. I mean, it's not bad, it's just a combination of other themes that they didn't create. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think to take the professional look and feel another step forward, maybe it might make sense to custom develop a theme that MX Linux can call its own for more brand recognition. But I don't think that you're going to feel like they did a bad job with the theme selection here. That's just a minor point. I just showed you the menu when I launched the appearance settings here. It's at the bottom left corner. The MX Linux icon is what you see right here that designates that this is your application menu. In my opinion, you know, that doesn't necessarily speak to me that this is an application launcher. The first time I've used MX Linux, I actually didn't even know where to go to launch applications, but you know, that's just a minor point. The application launcher is down here at the bottom left, and then from there you just launch whatever application you want. So we have LibreOffice, for example, that's included by default. And unfortunately, we are a little behind here, as to be expected from Debian's base. I hope that they do get this updated. We're up to LibreOffice 6.3, but we only have 6.1 in this release. But you know, it's definitely a good Office suite, and you know, let's face it, 6.3 isn't that much different, but it would be nice to have the latest version. But I'm glad to see that it's included. We have categories of other applications here as well. So we have some games installed by default. We have some development tools. Genie is an awesome text editor for doing development work. I've showed this off in other videos. It's awesome. You can even run your code directly from it, which is great. So for graphics, we have GIMP installed by default. That's what I use for pretty much all the thumbnails on my channel. I know they're not great, but I'm trying. But you know, GIMP does allow me to create those. We have Simple Scan right here for scanning documents. For internet, we have Firefox as the default browser, Thunderbird for email, and Transmission for downloading legal BitTorrent files. Under multimedia, we have Alsa Mixer for adjusting our volume, the Clementine music player, and of course we have VLC for watching video files. So we get a full suite of applications installed by default. We get all kinds of tools we can use to fine-tune our environment to our liking. There's definitely a lot of great things to say about this release. It runs very fast for me. I did mention that I didn't have any crashes as to be expected. It's based on Debian stable, this time again, Debian 10, which is awesome. And overall, I'm having a very pleasant experience with this version. I think that, you know, again, they're presenting to us a very good distribution with a lot of attention to detail, a lot of features that you generally don't find in other distributions. So I think that there's definitely a lot to like about MX Linux 19. Now, the only downsides that I can say here, I mean, it's based on Debian stable, which is a benefit because it gives you a very stable base on which this distribution is built, but a lot of the packages are just outdated, which is very typical of Debian stable. Now, hopefully their custom repositories will get some of these things updated, and that's very possible. Maybe they'll do that, but until that happens, we have the older version of LibreOffice, for example, and probably other applications as well, so that is a concern. And the other downside that I found is, again, you can't update from MX Linux 18 to this release. Now, MX Linux 18 is still being supported with security updates from Debian, so you don't have to upgrade right now, but the fact that there is no upgrade path, I think, is very lame. That's generally expected nowadays to have, and I understand the reason is because they do so many customizations. There's no way they can test all of them, but if other distributions are able to do that, then I'm sure if they put their mind to it, they can definitely come up with an upgrade path so people don't need to do a fresh install. But other than those minor petty complaints, I mean, let's face it, if you install MX Linux, I just don't feel like you'll have a bad experience. I think you'll be able to fine-tune it to your liking. I think you'll be very impressed with it. And I think that it's a very good fit for someone that's looking for an XFCE-based Linux distribution. And, I have to say, if you are looking for something that's using XFCE, I think that MX Linux is actually the distribution to go with for the best XFCE experience that you can possibly get today. So what do you think about MX Linux? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for checking out my video. I really appreciate it. If you found it useful, click that like button, and if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe so you'll see the latest content as soon as it becomes available. If you want to help me out, there's links down below for my Patreon page, as well as links for purchasing my Linux books, and also my affiliate store, which has a listing of Linux compatible hardware that I've actually tested personally. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.